It wasn't just a building. It was a kingdom, a self-contained world of escalators and food courts and storefront windows so clean they looked like moving pictures. It smelled like cinnamon and perfume and new carpet. It echoed with footsteps and laughter and Muzak versions of pop songs you half recognized. And for a certain stretch of American childhood, the mall was everything. You didn't go there for one thing. You went there for everything. To meet your friends, to waste time, to walk in circles, to try on clothes you couldn't afford and pretend you might come back later. It was a place where nothing needed to happen for something to happen. We weren't shoppers. We were explorers. Every store was a new world. The music store with its rows of cassettes and CDs you could flip through like trading cards. The toy store where you pressed every button on every box until something lit up or talked back. The bookstore where time moved differently and you felt smarter just for being there. The arcade with its neon glow and sticky floors where a pocketful of quarters could turn you into a hero. We had rituals. We met by the fountain. We shared one order of fries at the food court. We tried on sunglasses we had no intention of buying. And we always ended up at the photo booth, cramming 3 faces into 2 square frames, making funny faces that would live forever in the lining of someone's wallet. There were rules, unspoken ones. You didn't show up with your parents unless absolutely necessary. You didn't go to the mall without putting at least some effort into your outfit, even if it was just to walk in loops. You always checked who else was there before deciding how cool you were allowed to act. The mall was our first taste of independence. You didn't need a car to get there. Just a friend with a parent willing to drop you off. Once inside, you were on your own, not really, but it felt like it. You made decisions. You navigated social codes. You learned how to exist in a world without constant supervision. It was our training ground for adulthood, for friendship, for heartbreak. How many crushes bloomed under fluorescent lights? How many breakups happened on a bench outside the pretzel stand? How many notes were passed? Tears, shed hugs, exchanged alliances formed all while girls just want to have fun played faintly in the background. And the food. Oh, the food. Orange chicken on a toothpick. Slices of pizza bigger than your face. Giant cookies with M&Ms baked right in. It wasn't just about eating. It was about being seen eating. About where you sat, who you sat with. Whether you shared. Whether you got asked to share. It was a place of dreams. Of awkward flirtations and accidental run-ins and makeovers gone terribly wrong. Of best friends who became strangers and strangers who became something more. But most of all, it was ours. Before we could drive. Before we had jobs. Before the world got so big and scattered and fast. We had one place where everything came together. Where we could wander without purpose and still feel like we belonged. The mall didn't care who you were at school. It didn't care about grades or cliques or home life. The mall asked only one thing. Are you coming back next weekend? And we always said yes. Because even if we didn't know it, then even if we thought we were just killing time, we were making something. Memories. Inside jokes, stories that would outlast the mall itself. And when the stores started closing, when the fountain stopped running, when the food court lights dimmed one last time, we didn't just lose a place. We lost our center. But sometimes when we hear the right song in the background of a department store, or smell cinnamon and soft pretzels in the air, or see a photo booth tucked into the corner of a gas station. We remember. We were there. We belonged. And in a way, we always will. Because it wasn't just the shops or the snacks or the movies, it was what happened in between. The walking and talking, the dreaming and becoming, the way we moved through those polished hallways like we owned the world. Some of us got our first jobs there. Folded clothes, ran registers, refilled popcorn tubs, learned patience, learned customer service, learned how tiring it is to be on your feet all day, and how good it felt to be trusted with a key. And when holidays came, the mall sparkled. Garlands wrapped around the railings. Lights blinked in sync with carols. Santa's village took over the atrium. You could feel the energy shift, not just because of gifts, but because of the sense that something was coming, something joyful, something worth standing in line for. We celebrated birthdays there, bought first date outfits there, wandered aimlessly until we found exactly what we didn't know we were looking for. It was therapy before we knew we needed it. A space to figure ourselves out while trying on someone else's style. And now the mall is quieter, more empty storefronts, fewer familiar smells. That old photo booth in the corner, out of order, the fountain dry, the arcade replaced by a cell phone kiosk. But every so often you walk through and catch a glimpse. A group of kids laughing, a couple holding hands, a security guard nodding like he's seen it all before. And you remember. That place still lives. Maybe not in the same way, but in the memory, in the muscle, in the heart. Because the mall wasn't just the center of our weekends. It was the center of us. And maybe if you close your eyes and listen hard enough, you'll hear the music again. The voices, the laughter, the sound of your younger self walking a little too fast past the store with mirrored windows. And if you open your eyes and take one more lap around, maybe you'll feel like you belong again, even if just for a moment. We didn't realize it at the time, but the food court was our training ground, not just for eating, for everything. It was where we learned to negotiate. If you get the fries, I'll get the drink. Where we practiced independence, reading a laminated menu under fluorescent light, and pretending we weren't terrified to speak up. It was where we sat for hours, nursing a single soda like it was a rented seat. And it was where we learned people, where we observed first dates go spectacularly wrong, where we watched groups form and dissolve at adjacent tables, where breakups happened over cold pizza and new friendships began over shared lo mein, where some kids sat alone and others invited them over without a word. The food court was where we watched life unfold. It was loud, always loud, not because of music or announcements, but because it was alive. Voices bouncing off tile floors, trays clattering, kids laughing too loud, adults sighing too hard, and always the smell of something deep-fried and slightly burned. There was a hierarchy, too. Sit too close to the trash cans, and you clearly didn't know how this place worked. Get the table by the window's royalty, and if you could snag the corner booth where everyone could see you, but you didn't look like you were trying too hard, that was peak status. We didn't just sit, we performed. Laid-back posture if someone walked by, exaggerated laughter if someone you liked was within earshot. Subtle glances across the walkway, hoping for one, returned. The food was secondary. The real currency was presence. Who you were seen with. Sometimes it wasn't your day. You spilled your drink, sat at the wrong table, wore the wrong jacket. You felt invisible, but you came back next week anyway, because the food court always took you back. It was the place where everyone was equal, if only for a while. Whether your mom gave you $20, or just a handshake, and a ride, you still stood in line next to each other. You still ate under the same lights. It was a kind of democracy with orange chicken and soft pretzels. Some of us got our first jobs there. We handed out samples, wiped trays, cleaned tables while pretending not to eavesdrop. It was humbling and weirdly empowering. We learned how to smile at strangers, how to handle rude customers, how to wear a visor without irony. We saw the world from both sides of the counter, and during holidays the food court pulsed with a different energy. Santa down the hall, carolers by the escalators, extra tinsel around the fake plants, people in a rush but somehow smiling more, and we felt it. That seasonal magic even in the smell of reheated nachos. Looking back, we grew up between bites, between fries and fountain drinks, between awkward silences and unforgettable laughter, between spilled ketchup and big announcements. The food court wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was ours, and in its own way, it raised us. You could tell a lot about a person by their food court routine. Who went for the pizza every time? Who branched out and tried the new teriyaki place? Who treated lunch like a mission? And who just wandered until something smelled right? It was our cafeteria away from school, but without rules, without teachers, without bells. We got to pick our seat, choose our company, decide what version of ourselves we wanted to be that day, and the things we talked about, secrets whispered over French fries, crushes admitted between bites of egg roll, plans made most never followed through, but they felt real in the moment, dreams spoken aloud for the first time, and sometimes we said nothing at all. We just sat in the presence of our people, letting the buzz of the mall wrap around us like background music. Safe, familiar, like we belonged. Some of our biggest moments happened there in that chaotic, sticky, fluorescent-lit arena. We broke up, made up, cried, laughed until soda shot out our noses. We carved out identities between bites of food we barely tasted. And when it was time to go, we lingered, threw away our trash slowly, stopped by the water fountain, one more lap around the seating area just in case someone showed up. Because leaving meant the day was over. And none of us wanted that. Maybe that's why it sticks with us. Because the food court was the middle ground. Not quite home, not quite adventure, but a meeting place between who we were and who we were becoming. And maybe that's why it still hurts a little when we walk past one today, half empty, too quiet, and remember what it once held. Not just food, but every version of who we used to be, all sitting together at the table by the window, laughing over nothing. Like we'd never grow up. But we did. It didn't always look like love. Sometimes it looked like walking past the same store 3 times just to catch a glimpse. Sometimes it looked like buying something you didn't need just because they worked the register. Sometimes it was standing awkwardly at the edge of a friend group, hoping anyone would notice you noticing them. We fell in love at the mall, not the way movies show it, but the way real life hands it to you. Messy, funny, full of hope, and half-finished sentences. Maybe it was a glance across the food court. Maybe it was bumping into each other at the CD rack. Maybe it was being introduced by a friend of a friend and walking together for just a little too long. We didn't have plans. We had laps. Walking the mall wasn't about where you were going. It was about who you were with. And when it was someone new, someone who made your stomach flip, Every time your shoulders brushed, it felt like the whole place changed color. There were entire romances built in those hallways, built on food court fries and shared headphone jacks, on sitting next to each other at the movies barely watching, on brushing hands at the arcade change machine, on daring each other to do something dumb just to get a laugh. Some lasted a week, some lasted a summer, a few lasted longer than anyone expected, but all of them felt like everything at the time. There were photo booth kisses and textless breakups. There were love notes passed in person. There were slow goodbyes by the entrance, dragging out those last few minutes, pretending we hadn't already stayed too long. Sometimes it ended badly. We'd see them with someone new 2 weekends later. We'd hide in the bookstore until it felt safe to come out. We'd walk the opposite direction and pretend we didn't care. But we always came back. 'Cause the mall was full of second chances. You never knew who you'd run into, or what might happen. You just knew that if you showed up enough times, something might. And that was enough. Falling in love at the mall wasn't about the place. It was about the possibility, the magic of being young, surrounded by noise and color, and the thrill of maybe. We weren't good at it. We said the wrong things, wore the wrong clothes, sent the wrong signals, but we showed up. We tried. We hoped. And in the end, that's what made it feel real. Love at the mall wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and we remember it not for how it ended, but for how completely it felt like it never would, because the mall let us practice love in public without quite calling it love. It was holding hands just long enough to wonder if they felt the same. It was sharing headphones on the bench outside the bookstore, one earbud each letting a song do the talking. It was brushing shoulders and pretending it meant nothing, while secretly hoping it meant everything. We didn't have the words. We barely had the courage. But the mall made room for us. It didn't rush. It didn't judge. It let things unfold slowly through glances, jokes, and half-eaten pretzels, and sometimes we watched others fall in love, too. We saw the way someone's face lit up when their person showed up. We watched hugs that lasted just a little longer than usual. We noticed who always ended up walking side by side. And even when it wasn't us, we felt part of it. Because love at the mall wasn't always about being in it. Sometimes it was just being around it. Being part of a place where affection felt normal. Where crushes had space to breathe. Where nervous laughter echoed off tile floors and teenage hearts beat too fast over nothing and everything. Sometimes we got dumped over Sparrow. Sometimes we ghosted someone after 2 awkward laps. Sometimes we made mixtapes we never gave them and stared at our phones, waiting for replies that never came. But still we showed up, because maybe today would be different. Maybe this lap would lead to something. Maybe someone would notice. Maybe we'd say the right thing this time. And honestly, sometimes we did. Sometimes we met someone who smiled back, who walked with us for more than one weekend, who called when they said they would, who made the mall feel like more than a backdrop, who made it feel like the center of a brand new world. And those memories, they stick. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. Because they belonged to a time when we were learning how to love, clumsily, loudly, sincerely. And we'll never forget what it felt like to walk into the mall and wonder, will they be here today? Because if they were, it was going to be a good day. We told our parents we were going to see a movie, and sometimes we did. But most of the time, the movie was just the excuse. It was a ticket to independence, a sanctioned reason to be dropped off, a way to spend 2 hours at the mall without having to explain too much. Parents understood the theater. They trusted the theater. What they didn't know was that everything important happened before the previews even started. They were standing in line and pretending not to look around. There was the shuffle of figuring out who would sit next to who. There was the decision about who got snacks and who held the seats. And yes, there was the low-stakes debate of which movie to see, though we usually knew before we got there. We sat in the back row. Of course we did. It was the place of possibilities. Maybe your shoulder would touch theirs. Maybe you'd offer a piece of candy and your fingers would linger just a second too long. Maybe nothing would happen at all, and you'd spend the whole time thinking about what almost did. The movie was just the setting, the plot. It was unfolding in whispers and glances and inside jokes shared too loudly. It was the popcorn spill, the foot tap, the shared armrest dilemma that felt like life and death at 13. And when the credits rolled, we didn't rush out. We lingered. We made our way back into the mall, slowly blinking into the fluorescent light, like we were re-entering the world. Sometimes we walked in a group, sometimes in pairs, sometimes just two people hanging back on purpose. And that's when the real movie started. The lap around the mall after a film that was the epilogue. The chance to say what we really felt without having to look each other in the eye. That was good, someone would say. But they weren't talking about the movie. We had favorite theaters, favorite seats, favorite concession workers who gave us extra butter or turned a blind eye to outside candy. We built rituals out of routine. Same movie, same time, same people, and somehow it never got old. The movie theater was our place of beginning. First dates, first kisses, first times feeling seen in a way that stayed with us. We didn't always know what we were watching, but we knew what we were feeling, and we knew it mattered. There were friendships formed entirely in those ticket lines. That one kid you only saw on Friday nights, but always ended up sitting next to. That girl who passed you a note during the previews. The group that sat behind you whispering jokes that somehow made it better. We laughed too loud. We cried too easily. We clapped at the end even when no one else did. We lived bigger in the dark, and we tested our boundaries. We snuck into PG-13s before we were old enough. We kissed for the first time when the screen went dim. We dared ourselves to be brave not just with what we watched, but with who we were sitting next to. The theater was where we stretched into ourselves. And it wasn't always perfect. Sometimes the movie was boring. Sometimes the person beside you didn't feel the same. Sometimes you left feeling lonelier than when you walked in. But even that had meaning. Even that taught you something. Because the theater gave us space. A place where we didn't have to talk all the time. A place where silence could still be shared. A place where emotions were allowed to rise and fall without being explained. The previews gave us hope. The lights going down gave us permission. The opening credits felt like a door to another version of ourselves, more bold, more honest, more curious. And when the lights came back up, we weren't always ready, because even when the movie ended, the story didn't. We'd replay scenes on the ride home, quote lines for weeks, try to recreate the mood with playlists and posters and new plans. We didn't want to let go. Not of the movie, not of the moment, not of the version of ourselves we got to be while it lasted. And years later we may not remember the titles we saw, but we remember the butterflies. We remember the slow walk back into the mall, the way their hand brushed ours in the popcorn line, the way someone whispered, "That was awesome," and you knew they weren't talking about the film. We remember the magic of sitting beside someone, not quite touching and feeling like the whole world was just beginning. And that's enough. We didn't go to the mall for what we needed. We went for what we might find. The mall wasn't about errands. It was about atmosphere, about movement, about drifting past windows filled with things we didn't know we wanted until we saw them, and even then, rarely bought. We wandered. Not aimlessly, not really. There was always an unspoken logic to our loops. Start at the bookstore, swing through the music store, cut across the food court, linger by the movie posters, end up at the fountain or the arcade depending on the mood. We weren't in a hurry. That was the difference. Outside the mall, the world rushed. Inside it flowed. There was space to be slow, to browse, to circle back, to walk side by side with someone you were trying to figure out. To look at the same shirt 3 times and still not buy it. We tried things on without needing them. We wandered into stores with no intention of spending, and that was okay. The workers knew us. Half the time they were just like us, waiting for something interesting to happen. There was a rhythm to it. You looped until you ran into someone. You stopped and talked. Maybe joined their loop for a while. Maybe not. The mall let you drop in and out of people's lives like chapters. A few pages here. A conversation there. We weren't shopping for clothes or shoes or gifts. We were shopping for moments. That feeling of catching your reflection in the store mirror and not hating what you saw. That spark of recognition when a song played overhead that meant something to you. That sudden sense of being exactly where you were supposed to be, doing nothing important with people who felt like everything. The mall made room for that. It wasn't about consumption. It was about connection, about familiar paths and unexpected turns, about the joy of wandering into a store you'd never noticed and leaving with a story you'd never planned to tell. Some of us wandered because we didn't want to go home yet. The mall lights felt kinder than bedroom ceilings. The conversations there felt lighter, even when they went deep. There was something about walking and talking side by side, not face to face, that made it easier to say what we really meant. And there were moments when we wandered alone, not because we were lonely, but because we needed space, a mental breather, a loop to clear our thoughts. We didn't always call it mental health, but that's what it was. A way to reset, surrounded by noise that didn't demand anything from us. We wandered past posters, past kiosks, past stores we couldn't afford, but still imagined ourselves inside. That wandering wasn't pointless. It was dreaming with your feet. Sometimes we bumped into people we hadn't seen in years. Sometimes we made a new friend by trying on the same hat at the same time. Sometimes the wandering turned into something we told stories about later. Remember that day at the mall when we walked those polished floors like they were trails through our own little world. And they were. Every turn had meaning. Every store had a memory. Every lap carried the weight of what we hoped we'd run into. And what we learned, maybe without realizing it, was how to be alone, and with others at the same time. How to share space without pressure. How to move through the world with curiosity instead of agenda. Because the mall didn't ask us to hurry, or to spend, or to perform. It just invited us in, and let us wander. We wandered through seasons, too. Fall meant new jackets on display, and the faint smell of caramel apples near the food court. Winter brought garlands, window snowflakes, and a soundtrack of distant bells echoing across polished tiles. Spring was soft colors and prom dress windows. Summer was full of iced drinks, tank tops, and the feeling that anything could happen. The mall changed with us. Or maybe we changed with it. It was where we got taller, older, braver. Where we tested out new versions of ourselves, new hairstyles, new sneakers, new jokes we weren't sure would land. The mall was a mirror, and sometimes we liked what we saw. And sometimes we just needed a place to walk until we felt okay again. Because not every lap around the mall was happy. Some were quiet, some were heavy. Some were to clear your head after a breakup, or to walk off a bad grade, or to make sense of the silence between friends. But even then the mall held us. Let us move at our own pace. Let us be unseen when we wanted to be, and found when we didn't know we needed it. There was comfort in the familiar glow of store signs and the sound of your own footsteps, echoing just enough to remind you you were still here. And maybe that's what we miss most. That freedom to drift, to explore, to move without measuring how far we'd gotten or what we'd gained. To know that something good could be around the next corner, not because we deserved it, not because we earned it, but because we were there. And maybe that was the only requirement. Show up, walk slow, keep going, and sooner or later someone would surprise you, even if it was just a version of yourself you hadn't met yet. And that was enough. There was a point when everything started to change. Our jeans fit a little differently. Our voices dropped. We got busier. Schedules filled with things that didn't involve laps around food courts. Responsibilities crept in quietly but firmly. Jobs, homework, family stuff. Suddenly we weren't going to the mall every weekend. Sometimes we missed a week, then two, then somehow a whole season. But the mall didn't notice. The lights still buzzed. The same escalator still groaned a little when it reached the top. The same guy still worked the pretzel counter and still gave out free samples like he was handing over treasure. The fountain still ran and someone had tossed in new coins, each one a wish from someone who still believed in that kind of thing. It was both comforting and cruel, because when we came back, older, different, a little more tired, it was all still there, familiar, steady, waiting, and it hit us. We had grown up, but the mall hadn't. It was still playing the same music overhead, still selling the same sunglasses, still holding space for kids who now looked like we used to. It didn't judge us for changing. It just kept being exactly what it always had been. A place where people came to find something, even if they didn't know what. Some of us started working there. We took shifts folding jeans or running registers. We saw behind the curtain the stock rooms, the grumpy managers, the off-hour silence. It made the magic feel smaller but not gone. Just different. Like the mall had shared a secret with us and trusted us not to ruin it. Others only stopped by during holidays, buying gifts in a rush, forgetting to look up at the decorations we used to adore. Some came back with younger siblings in tow or kids of their own, pointing at the fountain, smiling at the food court, trying to explain why it mattered. But you couldn't really explain it. You had to feel it. You had to stand in front of that old record store and remember a song that once meant everything. You had to walk past the photo booth and remember a kiss that made you believe in things you don't say out loud anymore. You had to smell the pizza, hear the buzz of the arcade, and feel that ache of something too big to name, but too familiar to forget. The mall became a memory we could walk through, a living scrapbook, a map of who we were and what we were becoming. And yes, some stores closed, some corners went dark, some of it faded, but the heart of it, the feeling of it never really left, because as much as we like to say we grew up and moved on, a part of us never really did, and every time we walk through those glass doors we feel it again, that quiet recognition, that soft welcome, that echo of who we were walking just a few steps ahead, reminding us that the mall didn't need to change to still matter. We did enough of that on our own. Even now we sometimes stop by, not for shopping, not for errands, but just to see. Just to walk the halls, just to breathe it in. And maybe we grab a drink from the same smoothie place that's somehow still there. Or sit for a minute by the fountain, not even tossing in a coin this time. Because now we know better than to wish for more than what we had. Now and then we see someone our age doing the same thing, half a smile, a nod of recognition, both of us trying to hold a piece of something that slipped away without ever really saying goodbye. We don't run into as many people as we used to, but when we do, it's never awkward. It's just kind. Like finding your old jacket and slipping it on again. Familiar, worn in, safe. Sometimes we walk past teenagers laughing the way we used to, carrying giant sodas, whispering too loud, and we smile not because we want to go back, but because we were lucky to have been there at all. And in a world that spins faster every year, it's good to know something stayed the same. Even if it's just a hallway, even if it's just the echo of footsteps that sound a little like your own. Every mall had one. Some were simple, a round basin, a few steady streams of water, the gentle hum of recycled flow. Others were grander with lights that changed color, and tears that spilled into one another like a cascade of wishes. But no matter what it looked like, the fountain was always the center. It was our landmark, our lighthouse, the meeting point when you got separated, the backdrop for conversations you couldn't have anywhere else. If someone said, "Meet me at the fountain," you knew exactly where to go and exactly what that meant. We threw coins in, but we threw more than that. We tossed in secrets, hopes, questions. We wished for snow days, for better grades, for a yes, for a second chance, for someone to walk toward us with that look on their face, and sometimes they did. The fountain wasn't just a decoration, it was a mood, a soundtrack. It filled the silence when we ran out of things to say. It gave us something to look at when we were too nervous to make eye contact. It shimmered under mall skylights, making everything feel just a little more magical. We took photos in front of it, leaned against the ledge for hours, tossed our last quarters and said, "This one's for luck." The fountain was a witness to friendships beginning, to hearts breaking, to hours slipping by without us even noticing. And it was always running, always flowing. Even when the mall was quiet, even when the stores were closed, even when we weren't there. It kept going. It taught us something. That life moves forward, even when we're stuck. That you can't hold water in your hands, but you can feel it. Watch it. Trust that more is coming. That silence can be steady, and steady can be sacred. And maybe that's why even now we find ourselves drawn to fountains. We stand by them. We stare into them. We reach for something we can't quite name. Because for a moment, we remember how it felt to belong to a place, to a time, to each other, and how the sound of water was enough to hold it all together. There were moments we planned around the fountain. We met dates there. We told friends where to find us. We even arranged group photos with Santa's sleigh positioned nearby. It was more than just a physical location. It was the emotional center of everything. On certain days, it sparkled. Light hit it just right, and it looked like something out of a dream. We'd lean close and whisper things we weren't ready to say out loud anywhere else. We'd cry there too quietly behind sunglasses or between bites of pretzel. And the water never judged. The ledge was always just the right height. For sitting, for waiting, for leaning back and letting your feet swing above the tile. It was the place you waited for someone to arrive. And sometimes the place you stayed long after they'd left. Even during holidays when the mall buzzed and decorations overwhelmed every corner, the fountain stayed consistent, a gentle calm in the chaos. It was where people paused, where kids leaned in to make a wish, where couples held hands, where tired shoppers dropped their bags and took a breath. We didn't always realize it, but the fountain watched us grow. It saw us in our awkward years, our brave moments, our first heartbreaks, and our happiest laps around the mall. It held all of it like water does. And when we return now older, maybe even with kids of our own, we stop there again. Maybe not for long, maybe just out of habit, but we glance at it. We toss in a coin without a word. We feel the memory stir, not just of one moment, but of many layered together like ripples. Because the fountain wasn't just where everything met, it was where everything began. And no matter how much has changed around it, that sound, that soft, endless trickle, reminds us of who we were, and how lucky we were to be there. Some fountains had benches nearby, perfect for parents, who needed a rest for friends who wanted to talk for kids with sticky fingers finishing their ice cream. We learned patience there, waiting for our ride home. We learned kindness watching someone sit beside a stranger and strike up a conversation. It wasn't just water. It was gathering. It was presence. It was a pause in a world that was always moving. That's what made the fountain so special. It asked nothing of us and gave everything in return. We didn't know it at the time, but the sound of that water became part of our soundtrack. A soft undercurrent in our coming of age. A background note we didn't notice until we left, and noticed it was missing. Now when we hear fountains in other places, airports, plazas, parks, we get a flicker of it. That feeling, that rhythm, that moment in time when we were still figuring things out, and the fountain didn't care who we were becoming. It just kept flowing. Maybe that's what we miss the most, the way it made space for us. No questions, no judgments, just room to feel, to grow, to let go, to start again. Even when the mall began to dim, the fountain still danced. The last of the shops pulled their gates, food court lights softened, and closing announcements echoed overhead. But the fountain stayed on, glowing like a nightlight, in the belly of something once so loud. It was always the last light on, even when we left it behind when we moved away. When our weekends filled with errands and obligations, some part of it kept glowing in our minds. Not just the fountain itself, but everything around it. The people, the laughter, the waiting. It became a symbol of what lasted, of what didn't need to shout to be heard, of the quiet beauty in a place that stayed exactly as it was long after we had changed. Sometimes we'd swing by the mall late just to see it, to remind ourselves that something familiar still existed. And even if the stores were closed and the halls were empty, that soft water sound still met us echoing gently across tile. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. The light was still on. The water was still flowing. And that was enough. Because sometimes the most powerful memories aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet ones that linger. The ones that hum in the background while everything else changes. The ones that don't need to demand your attention to shape who you become. The mall in its final hours was like the last song of a school dance. Bittersweet, familiar, a little slower, a little softer. And as you swayed toward the exit, you knew you might not be back for a while. But that light would still be there. That fountain would still be running. And the version of you that once waited by its edge, hopeful, nervous, alive, would still be sitting there, just in case you ever came back. Because the mall didn't say goodbye. Not really. It just waited, like it always had. Light on, doors unlocked, water running, like a memory that never stopped glowing, and maybe in some small way it never really closed. Not to us. Not where it mattered most. There's a strange kind of peace in knowing something outlived you, not in years, but in meaning. That a place can carry echoes long after the crowd is gone. That the sound of your laughter, once trapped between glass walls and tile, still lingers if you listen closely enough. Maybe you visited one last time, long after you thought you were done with it. The mall was quieter, smaller. Stores had changed names. Your favorite corner was now a pop-up stand. The photo booth was gone, but the feeling still there. Still humming beneath the surface. You may have walked those halls with someone new, a partner, a child, maybe just your older self, and tried to explain why it all mattered. Why this empty food court held more weight than most classrooms. Why this fountain still made you stop in your tracks. Maybe they didn't quite get it, but that's okay, because it wasn't about them. It was about a version of you that lived there, grew there, found something there. A first kiss, a hard goodbye, a joke that still makes you laugh, a glance that changed everything, a friend who became a stranger who became everything, all of that, in one mall. And when the final shop closes, when the neon signs are taken down, when the tile gets torn up, and replaced by something newer, sleeker, more efficient, it won't really matter. Because the mall already did what it was supposed to do. It held you. It saw you. It let you grow. And in the end, maybe that's the highest purpose a place can serve. To become part of who you are. And to stay quietly as the last light on. And we're not the only ones. We've seen the security guards who've worked the night shift for 20 years. The kiosk owner who still remembers your order from high school. The janitor who nods when he sees you, like no time has passed at all. They've watched generations come and go. They've seen the laughter, the fights, the makeups and breakups. They are the silent historians of the mall. They're the reason it still breathes. They, too, leave the light on. Not just literally, but spiritually. Their presence is a form of stewardship, of care, of keeping the place alive even when the crowds thin and the signs fade. And in that quiet, in those final echoes of shoes across floor tiles, there is peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but from remembering well. From knowing you are part of something. From knowing a piece of you still lives there, not in any store or bench, but in the air itself. Still waiting, still shining, still home. And in your dreams you might find yourself there again. Wandering the familiar loop, passing the same old stores, hearing your name called from just beyond the food court, smelling the blend of popcorn perfume and soft pretzels. It's not déjà vu. It's memory trying to remind you you once belonged somewhere, and maybe in the ways that matter you still do. We didn't take souvenirs. Not really. We didn't pocket a napkin from the food court or steal a chair from the arcade. We didn't sneak a tile from the fountain or rip down a sign from our favorite store, and yet we carry it all. We carry the sound of those footsteps echoing across the mall floor. We carry the smell of cinnamon pretzels and cologne samples and pizza crust. We carry the taste of a shared drink and the laugh that came right after. We carry the awkward silence of a first date, the electricity of a first touch, the heaviness of a final goodbye, and most of all, we carry who we were when we didn't yet know who we'd become. The mall wasn't just about what we bought. It was about what we brought to each other, to the space, to the stage where we figured ourselves out in full view of each other and sometimes in secret. We were teenagers trying on sunglasses and identities. We were best friends pretending not to care what others thought, even though we absolutely did. We were kids with nowhere else to go, and yet we made it everything. It was never just about the food court or the stores or the fountain. It was about what happened in between. The pauses, the sidelong glances, the skipped heartbeats, and the long conversations on benches we never thought twice about. It was the little rituals, one more lap, one more fry, one more quarter in the arcade. And when the mall changed or closed, we didn't lose it, because what mattered most had already come with us. In our way of noticing, in our way of connecting, in our love of the slow wander, in how we listen for echoes in new places, in how we still pause by fountains. We learned how to be with each other there, how to laugh loud, how to walk side by side, how to sit in silence and let it be enough. So when someone asks, "Why do you care so much about a mall?" we smile. Because they're not really asking about the mall. They're asking about memory, about youth, about a version of us we don't often talk about but never really left behind. We didn't take anything. We just never let go. And maybe that's the truest kind of souvenir. And when we step into a new place, a new city, a new job, a new life, we bring a little piece of the mall with us. It's in the way we know how to people, watch, the way we pause before entering a space, instinctively scanning for familiar faces. It's in the way we know how to linger without rushing, how to loop a space twice before saying goodbye. We've been shaped by food court wisdom and fitting room revelations, by impromptu heart-to-hearts, outside the bathroom by phone calls made from payphones near the exit, by long walks made longer on purpose. The mall was our blueprint for human interaction. We learned eye contact there, learned social timing, learned how to read a friend's mood by the way they walked 3 steps ahead, learned how to forgive, learned how to flirt, learned how to show up. And now, when we find a spot that feels even a little bit like that, maybe a bookstore, maybe a quiet cafe, maybe a park, with just the right mix of movement and stillness, we sit down and we settle in. Because we know what it means to belong somewhere. The mall taught us that, and the people we became. They didn't arrive fully formed. They were built in those tiled hallways, between Hot Topic and the record store, at the foot of a fountain, inside a moment that looked small, but became everything. So no, we didn't take souvenirs. We became them. And even now, when life moves too fast, when spaces feel colder, when connection feels more digital than real, we carry that warmth with us, that patience, that instinct to look around, to say hi, to hold space for someone, just because we can. The mall gave us more than memories. It gave us habits of the heart. We learned to show up without being asked. to make eye contact with a stranger, to hold a door open, to wait without checking our phones, to sit on a bench and just watch the world turn for a while. It gave us a way of being slow, deliberate, hopeful, and that stays with you, long after the shops have closed, long after the echoes fade, long after you've become someone entirely new. You still carry the best parts of who you were there. You always will.